My uncle hadn't spoken to me in 7 years. Not once. Not on my birthday. Not when my grandmother passed. Not when I sent the formal letter asking for what was rightfully mine. 7 years of absolute silence. Then one Thursday afternoon, he walked through the glass doors of my design studio like he owned the place, which, as I am about to tell you, was the most catastrophically wrong assumption he has ever made in his entire life. My name is Maya, and I am 32 years old. I am the founder and creative director of a boutique interior design firm based in Austin, Texas. Before I tell you what happened the day my uncle walked into my studio, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. And if you have ever had someone from your own family try to take credit for a life you built from scratch, hit like and subscribe right now, because you are going to want to hear every word of this. It was a Thursday in late October. The afternoon sun was cutting through the west-facing windows of my studio, casting long, warm strips of light across the polished concrete floors. My team had just finished installing the sample boards for a high-end residential project on Lake Travis, and the space smelled faintly of fresh cedar and textile swatches. I was standing at my drafting table, reviewing the final mood board for a commercial client downtown, a cup of cold brew sitting at my elbow, completely absorbed in the work. My studio occupied the ground floor of a converted 1940s warehouse on South Congress. And every single detail of that space, the exposed brick walls, the custom brass pendant lights, the hand-poured resin reception desk I had designed and sourced myself. I built that place from a vision and a spreadsheet and 7 years of working until midnight. That is when my studio manager, Priya, appeared at my shoulder. Her expression was the kind that made your stomach drop before she even opened her mouth. "Maya," she said quietly, keeping her voice low so the rest of the team wouldn't hear. "There are 2 people at the front asking for you. They say they're family." I looked up from my drafting table. Through the glass partition separating my work area from the reception lounge, I could see them. My uncle Derek, my father's older brother, stood with his arms crossed, scanning the studio with the slow, appraising look of a man calculating square footage. His wife Sandra stood beside him, handbag tucked tightly under one arm, her eyes moving across my team's workstations with an expression that landed somewhere between curiosity and contempt. My steps slowed as I crossed the studio floor. A flood of cold memories rose up without warning. The last time I had seen my uncle, I was 24 years old. It was the summer after my grandmother died. I had flown home to San Antonio for the reading of her will, grieving and exhausted and wholly unprepared for what was waiting for me at the attorney's office on the other side of that mahogany table. My grandmother Dorothy had been a meticulous woman. She had set aside a designated trust fund of $90,000 specifically for my graduate school tuition in architecture and interior design. She had told me about it years before she passed. She had looked me in the eye and said, "This is yours, Maya. This is for your future." What I discovered at that attorney's office was that the trust account had been drained 4 months before she died, during a period when her health had declined enough that she required a legal guardian. My uncle Derek had filed the paperwork to become her temporary financial guardian. He had used that legal authority to liquidate my education trust, every single penny of it. When I confronted him outside the attorney's office, he told me I was being dramatic and ungrateful. He told me my grandmother had changed her mind. He told me I could figure out school on my own like everyone else does. 2 days later, he stopped returning my calls. Then my aunt stopped responding to texts. Within a month, my father, who had always deferred to his older brother on everything, quietly withdrew from my life too, choosing family loyalty over basic decency. For 7 years, they kept that silence. They showed up to nothing. They checked on me, never. As far as they were concerned, I had ceased to exist the moment I stopped being useful. Yet here they were, standing in the middle of everything I had built without them. I took a slow breath, straightened my posture, and walked out to the reception area. My uncle turned when he saw me. There was no apology on his face, no embarrassment for the years of silence. Just that same flat, assessing look he always used when he walked into a room and started deciding what he could get out of it. "Maya," he said, nodding once like we had spoken last week. "You have done well for yourself here. The place looks expensive." His wife Sandra touched the edge of my resin reception desk with 2 fingers, the same way someone touches a piece of furniture in a store they have no intention of buying from. It is a little industrial for my taste, she said, but the light is nice. I kept my voice perfectly level. You do not have an appointment, Derek. What do you want? He let out a short, impatient exhale, like I was the one being unreasonable. He reached into the breast pocket of his blazer and pulled out a folded set of documents. He set them down on my reception desk with a deliberate, flat smack that made Priya flinch from across the room. Let us skip the small talk, he said. I have had my attorney draft a formal claim of restitution against the assets of your firm. The position we are taking is that the seed capital you used to start this business was derived from the trust fund your grandmother originally intended to benefit the entire family, not just you. We are asking for a 30% equity stake in your studio, retroactively structured as repayment. You sign today, and we call it even. No courts, no public filing, just family taking care of family. I stared at him for a long moment without saying a single word. Sandra nodded along, her expression arranged into something she probably thought looked reasonable. We are not trying to be difficult, she added. We are just asking for what is fair. Dorothy would have wanted us all to benefit from her legacy, not just the one grandchild who decided to run away to Austin and cut everyone off. The audacity of that reframing was almost artistic. I did not run away. I was financially gutted and left with no choice but to rebuild from nothing, which is exactly what I had spent 7 years doing. I had worked 3 jobs in my mid-20s, drafting assistant by day, waitress on weekends, freelance renderer on nights, saving aggressively, living in a studio apartment with no air conditioning in an Austin summer, eating rice and beans 4 nights a week, until I had enough capital to secure a small business loan for my first year of operations. I had found a business mentor, a retired architect named Walter, who connected me with my first 2 clients and taught me the financial architecture of a small firm. I had reinvested every profit margin back into the business for 4 years before I paid myself a salary worth speaking of. I had built this firm, this brand, and this balance sheet with obsessive, grinding, painful precision. Not with their money, not with anyone's inheritance, with mine. You have 30 seconds to pick those papers back up and walk out of my studio, I said calmly. Or I am going to invite you to explain your position in a conference room, and you are not going to enjoy what happens in that room. My uncle's jaw tightened. He picked the documents up off the desk, but only to tap them against his palm the way people do when they are about to deliver what they think is the final word. I was hoping to do this the easy way, he said. His voice dropped a register in the way that men do when they want to sound dangerous. But I did my homework before I came here, Maya. I know that this studio sits on a commercial lease. I know who your landlord is. I have been a member of the Austin Commercial Property Owners Association for 11 years. Bill Caraway, the man who owns this building, sat on the board with me for 4 of those years. We have had dinner together. We have shaken hands together. I am going to call him this afternoon, and I am going to explain to him that his tenant is currently the subject of a financial dispute involving potentially fraudulent business formation. I will suggest strongly that continuing your lease creates liability for him. Bill is a cautious man. He will not want the exposure. You will have a non-renewal notice before the end of the week. Sandra lifted her chin slightly, satisfied. We are not trying to hurt you, she said again, in that same tone people use when they are absolutely trying to hurt you. We are giving you a choice. I looked at my uncle. I looked at the documents in his hand. I looked at his wife with her designer bag and her careful smile. And then I made a decision, the same decision I made the night my university acceptance letter arrived, and I had to figure out how to pay for it without $90,000 of my grandmother's money. I decided not to panic. I decided to be smarter than the person threatening me. You want to call Bill Caraway? I said. I will call him right now if you prefer, Derek said, reaching into his pocket for his phone. I would prefer that very much, I replied. Actually, let us all hear that conversation. Come with me. I turned and walked toward my conference room. After a brief, confused pause, I heard their footsteps follow me across the concrete floor. My conference room was a calm, well-lit space, a live-edge walnut table, 6 leather chairs, a large format print of a structural detail I had designed for a hotel project in the hill country. I gestured for them to sit. I remained standing at the head of the table. Make the call, I said. Put it on speaker. My uncle sat down slowly, studying me the way he had studied my studio, calculating, searching for the leverage point he might have missed. But the call to Bill Caraway was his strongest card, and I had just invited him to play it. That apparently overrode whatever hesitation was forming in the back of his mind. He unlocked his phone, found the contact, and set it face up on the walnut table. The line rang twice. A man's voice answered, older, measured, the voice of someone interrupted during the evening portion of their day. Derek, it has been a while. My uncle's posture changed immediately. His shoulders went back. His voice took on that artificial warmth that people who are used to working rooms deploy like a tool. Bill, hey! Sorry to catch you on a Thursday. I have got a situation I was hoping you could help me with. Quick favor between friends. There was a short pause. What kind of situation? I am sitting in a studio on South Congress right now. Commercial tenant of yours, a design firm called Meridian Studio. The owner is actually my niece, and we have a financial dispute going on regarding the origins of her startup capital. I wanted to let you know, as a courtesy, that this dispute may become a matter of public record. It might be worth having your property manager review her lease terms for early termination options. I just think you should know what you are dealing with before it becomes your problem too. The line was quiet for a moment. I watched Sandra smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her sleeve. I watched my uncle watching me, waiting for the color to drain from my face. Derek, Bill Caraway said finally, his tone shifting into something noticeably more careful. I appreciate the call, but I have to be straight with you. I am not in a position to help you with this. My uncle's brow furrowed slightly. It is just a conversation, Bill. A heads up between professionals. I am not asking for anything complicated. I understand what you are asking, Caraway said. But I cannot take action against that tenant. I cannot flag her lease or initiate any termination process. Why not? Derek's voice took on a tighter edge. You are the landlord. You have discretion over your properties. There was another pause on the line. When Caraway spoke again, there was something in his voice that sounded less like reluctance and more like mild bewilderment. Derek, I have not been the landlord on that building for almost 8 months. I sold the South Congress property as part of a portfolio divestment last spring. I do not own that building anymore. I do not own the parking structure behind it, and I certainly have no authority over the lease agreements currently in place. I handed everything over at closing. I have zero involvement. Sandra's hand stopped moving on her sleeve. My uncle sat forward slightly, his elbows coming to the table. You sold it. When exactly? March. Maybe April. It closed fast, all cash buyer, no financing contingencies, clean title transfer. Very straightforward deal. Caraway's voice carried the faint edge of someone who was becoming aware that he had been recruited into something he wanted no part of. Look, Derek, I do not know what is going on between you and your niece, but I am not the person you need to be talking to. Whatever you are trying to accomplish, I cannot help you. Please do not put me in the middle of a family matter. Who bought it? My uncle asked. His voice had lost the warm professional gloss. It was flat now. Who is the new owner? Caraway exhaled. It was a private acquisition, an investment company, small firm, independent. They came in well above asking price. Moved fast. I was happy to sell. He paused. The name of the entity was Sycamore Capital Partners. That is all I can tell you. Have a good night, Derek. The line went silent. My uncle set his phone down on the table very slowly. He looked at it for a moment. Then he looked up at me. The room had shifted. I could see him recalibrating, trying to find the new angle, the new leverage point. A private holding company, he said finally, attempting to recover his composure. That is fine. It just means I need to make a few more calls tomorrow. These boutique investment firms always have principals I can reach. Austin is a small city for commercial real estate. Someone on the ownership side will know someone I know. Sandra nodded in agreement, though her confidence had taken on a slightly more brittle quality. You do not need to make any more calls, I said. And why is that? I walked to the low credenza running along the far wall of the conference room. I opened the second drawer and removed a thick legal envelope, heavy paper, bound with a navy ribbon, stamped with the seal of the Texas Secretary of State. I walked back to the head of the table and set the envelope down in front of him. Open it, I said. He looked at the envelope for a moment before reaching for it. He undid the ribbon, lifted the flap, and pulled out the top document, a set of articles of organization for a Texas limited liability company. His eyes moved down the page. I watched the moment he reached the section on registered agents and managing members. He read the name once, then he read it again. I leaned forward and placed my finger on the line he was staring at. Say it out loud, Derek. I want Sandra to hear it too. He didn't speak. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. I will say it, I offered. Sycamore Capital Partners, LLC, registered in the state of Texas. Sole managing member and 100% ownership interest. Maya Christine Okafor. That is my full legal name, in case you have forgotten it over the past 7 years. Sandra made a small, involuntary sound, not quite a gasp, but something that fell apart on the way to becoming one. I bought this building 8 months ago, I said, straightening up and folding my hands in front of me. I own the ground floor where my studio operates. I own the second floor, which is currently leased to a financial consulting group. I own the parking structure behind the building and the small courtyard adjacent to it. You came into my studio today threatening to call my landlord and have me evicted. Derek, I am the landlord. You just threatened to evict me from my own property. My uncle's face had gone through several colors in rapid succession. He was now somewhere in the territory of a man who realizes he has walked, with enormous confidence, directly off the edge of a cliff. That is impossible, he said, and the flatness in his voice made the words sound more like a question than a statement. You are a designer. You do not have the capital to acquire commercial real estate. That is an interesting assumption, I said. You assumed that because you took my grandmother's trust fund when I was 24, I would be financially compromised indefinitely. You assumed I would spend my 20s clawing back to zero and never get any further. You assumed that the ceiling you put on my life when you emptied that account was permanent. I pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat down across from him, bringing my eye level to his for the first time. I worked 3 jobs for 2 years, I said. I found a mentor. I saved. I started the firm. I reinvested for 4 years before I touched a salary. I did the work, Derek. Every single day. I did the work. And 4 years ago, I started building a real estate portfolio on the side with the retained earnings from the firm. Residential properties first, then commercial. When Bill Caraway's portfolio went to market last spring, I had the liquidity and the relationships to move fast. I bought this building in an all-cash transaction, ahead of 3 other competing offers, in 26 days. Sandra had stopped nodding. She was staring at her handbag. My uncle set the articles of organization down on the table with the careful, deliberate movement of a man trying very hard not to show that his hands were unsteady. Congratulations on the acquisition, he said, his voice attempting sarcasm but landing somewhere closer to defeat. It doesn't change the substance of our claim. The equity dispute is still valid regardless of what real estate you happen to own. Actually, I said, I am glad you brought that up, because there is one more thing we should discuss. I reached back into the credenza and placed a second document on the table. This one was a commercial lease agreement. My uncle's name was on the tenant line. So was the address of a building on West 6th Street, where he had operated his financial services practice for the last 9 years. He stared at the lease for a long moment without touching it. That building went to a development group 3 years ago, I said. The development group ran into debt service issues 18 months later. I purchased the distressed note on it through Sycamore Capital 10 months ago and became the primary lien holder. 6 weeks ago, the previous equity holder surrendered the deed in lieu of foreclosure. The title transferred to me on the 14th of last month. I tapped the document. I have been your de facto landlord for approximately 3 weeks, Derek. You are currently operating your practice on a month-to-month holdover tenancy, which, under Texas commercial property law, gives the property owner the right to modify lease terms with 30 days written notice. The silence in the room was total. I reached into the envelope one final time and placed a single-page document in front of him. Clean white paper. 1 paragraph of legal text at the top, a signature line at the bottom. That is a notice of revised lease terms, I said. A 250% rent increase, effective 30 days from today. You can sign and pay the new rate, or you can vacate the West 6th Street office before the deadline. Sandra made a sound that was unmistakably distress. She turned to my uncle and gripped his forearm. "Derek," she whispered, "tell me she cannot do this." He didn't answer her. He was still staring at the lease document, his jaw set, the muscles working silently in his face. "I want you to understand something," I said, keeping my voice steady and without cruelty. "I did not plan this specifically to hurt you. I planned it because I spent 7 years learning exactly how power works in the real world. I learned that the people who take from you are usually counting on you to stay small and stay quiet. They are counting on you to still need them. They are counting on the emotional weight of the word family to keep you from fighting back. I stopped being small 5 years ago. I stopped being quiet 4 years ago. And I stopped letting the word family be used as a weapon against me a long time before that." My uncle looked up from the documents. For the first time since he had walked through my studio doors, the calculating assessment was gone from his face. What was left beneath it was something I had never seen from him before: the unadorned, uncurated look of a man who has run out of moves. "How much?" he said quietly. "I am sorry? How much will it take to make this go away? The lease, the document? What number makes this a conversation we don't have?" I shook my head slowly. "This is not a negotiation, Derek. You came here today with a fraudulent equity claim designed to extract money from a business I built with my own hands. You attempted to leverage a personal relationship with my former landlord to threaten my livelihood. Those are the actions that brought you to this table. I am not selling you a softer outcome." He pushed his chair back slowly and stood. Sandra stood beside him, the designer bag held in front of her now like something to hide behind. He straightened his blazer with the automatic reflex of a man reassembling his dignity from whatever pieces he could reach. "Your father is going to hear about this," he said. It was not a threat exactly. It had the texture of a man saying the last thing he could think of to say. "My father has known where I am for 7 years, I replied. "He has my phone number. He knows the name of my firm. If he wants to find me, I am not difficult to locate." I walked to the conference room door and opened it. Priya was at her workstation on the far side of the studio, very deliberately not looking in our direction. The rest of my team had the quiet, focused posture of people who are professionally committed to minding their own business while also hearing absolutely everything. My uncle walked past me through the door without another word. Sandra followed, her heels sharp against the concrete floor. They crossed the studio in silence, pushed through the glass front doors, and walked out into the warm October afternoon. I stood in the doorway of the conference room for a moment, listening to the ordinary sounds of my studio reconstituting themselves: a keyboard, a phone notification, the faint background hum of the ventilation system. Then I went back to my drafting table, sat down, and picked up the mood board I had been working on before they arrived. The equity claim documents my uncle had left on my reception desk went to my attorney the following morning. She confirmed within 48 hours that the claim had no legal foundation. The trust fund disbursement he had executed during my grandmother's guardianship was well outside any statute of limitations for civil recovery, and there was no valid legal theory under which my business formation could be characterized as derived from that capital. The claim was withdrawn 2 weeks later without a hearing. The 30-day notice expired on the 15th of November. My uncle's practice vacated the West 6th Street building on the 14th, moving their small remaining operation to a shared co-working space in a suburb north of the city. Within 3 months, 2 of his 4 long-term clients had moved their accounts to a larger downtown firm with a more established address. I do not take pleasure in that. But I also do not apologize for it. For the West 6th Street building, I spent the following 2 months doing something I had been thinking about for a long time. I renovated the 2nd and 3rd floors and signed a 5-year lease agreement with a nonprofit called Foundation Forward, a women's professional development organization that provides free business mentorship, financial literacy coaching, and workspace to women between the ages of 22 and 35 who are building businesses from the ground up, many of them without family financial support. I set the rent at $1 per year. The organization moved in on a Tuesday in January. I remember standing on the sidewalk outside the building that morning, watching 3 young women carry boxes through the front door, laughing at something one of them had said. completely absorbed in the specific energy of people who are starting something real. One of them was 24 years old. She had moved to Austin from Beaumont 2 years earlier with exactly one bag of clothes and a business plan she had written on her phone during her lunch breaks at a warehouse job. I know what that feels like. I know the precise weight of that bag and the specific quality of silence in a city that does not yet know your name. What my uncle did not understand, what people who weaponize family never seem to understand, is that taking something from someone does not diminish them permanently. It only tells you what they will do when they have nothing left to lose. When my grandmother's trust fund disappeared, I lost a financial safety net, but I also lost the illusion that people who are supposed to protect you will actually do so when the cost is high enough. That is a brutal thing to lose at 24. It is also, I have come to believe, the most useful thing I have ever been forced to learn. I did not need Derek's approval to build my firm. I did not need his contacts or his associations or his 11 years on the commercial property board. I needed to understand the systems he thought only people like him had access to. And then I needed to build my own leverage inside those systems, quietly and completely, until the day arrived when his assumptions about what I had and had not built came crashing back to earth in my conference room on a Thursday afternoon in October. The people who count on you to stay small are right about you, right up until the moment they walk through your door. I am back on the line at Meridian Studio now. We have 4 active projects running simultaneously, a residential commission in Dallas starting next month, and a shortlist consideration for a hotel lobby redesign in New Orleans. Priya has started training an assistant. I finally hired a second senior designer in December. My studio is full on most days, full of people doing real work, building real things, with a level of focus and care that has nothing to do with anyone who ever tried to shrink them. If you are watching this right now, and you are in the middle of that in-between stretch after the people who were supposed to back you chose not to, and before the version of your life you are building has fully arrived, I want you to hear this directly. The silence they gave you is not a verdict on your worth. It is a window. Use every hour of it. Learn the systems. Build the leverage. Be patient with the timeline and ruthless about the work. The moment will come when they walk back into your life expecting the person they discarded, and they will find the person you built instead. Hit subscribe if this story reached you. Leave a comment and tell me where you are in your own story. I read every single one.